It's been roughly 14 years since the last Mega Man X and Mega Man Zero game, and one of the most debated topics in the fanbase is the timeline. A lot of the time, the arguments are laid with a lot of misinterpreting information or just plain headcanon. It's not entirely their fault though. Capcom has had a pretty bad history of contradicting themselves. In this video, I'll go over what information we currently have with the timeline, while also busting some myths. And by the end of this, everyone should have a good idea of what the timeline actually is, until Capcom decides to screw it up again. First, let's debunk some myths. The main three ones that usually happen when we talk about the timeline is X7 and X8 is not canon. Inafune says X5 is meant to be the last game in the series, so nothing else matters. And finally, there's a split timeline. So let's handle the first two together. Now, admittedly, some of this is through Inafune condemning X6 for being made in the first place. He has made it very clear that he was not really a fan of X6 being made behind his back. But the fact of the matter is, the games were made and they were meant to be made with the timeline in mind. While Inafune is credited a lot in the public for being the father of Mega Man, he doesn't actually own the IP itself, and he never has. So while he did want X5 to be the last of the series, Capcom did not, and that was the end of it. That said, X6, X7, and X8 do take the Mega Man Zero series into account, both in-game and in marketing. On top of that, we also have integrates keeping in mind of the Progressing X series, as indicated by an interview regarding the ZX Advent series, where they wanted to add an Axel but were unsure if they should due to the fact that they did not know what the ending for Axel was going to be. Now, why would they do that if the Zero series was completely non-canon to X8? Now we go to the final myth, which involves there being a split timeline. Now, this is actually true, but it's not where you think it is. We'll get into that once we get there. Now with that over and done with, let's get into the timeline, shall we? Now, as with any timeline, there needs to be a starting point and an ending point. Our starting point is going to be Light stealing away X, and coincidentally, Y stealing away Zero. Now, this is well documented, it's in several interviews, it's referenced in the games themselves, and even Archie Comics references this as well. This is very well documented. If you don't believe me, just Google it. Now, our ending point is going to be Zero waking up to start the Mega Man Zero series. Now, of course, there is more stuff that happens within this series, but for our purposes, we're only worried about Mega Man X to Mega Man Zero, not actually what happens within Mega Man Zero. Now that we have our ending point, let's go back to the beginning and progress from there. Now, once again, these are all very well documented. We do know that Dr. King finds X, and then he goes on to create Reploids as well as Sigma. Then the Reploids do go Maverick due to imperfections. As a result, the Maverick Hunters are established with Sigma at the helm as the leader. Now, as far as X is concerned, things do get a little muddy because we're not sure if X just stayed at home with Dr. Kane, or if he actually joined the Maverick Hunters early and was recognized as a B-class hunter due to his naivety and unwillingness to fight. We're not entirely sure which one is canon, but for our purposes, we don't really care too much about that. Next up, Sigma fights Zero, and as Zero is the carrier of the Maverick virus, Sigma gets infected right after it. After that, Zero turns good and joins the Maverick Hunters, and after that, Day of Sigma happens. Now, this is where our first contradiction happens, because in Day of Sigma, Dr. King dies during a missile attack on Able City, while in Mega Man X1, 2, and 3, he's still alive and kicking. Now, the closest we have to an official answer to this question is within the 2021's Mega Man X Maverick Hunters Field Guide. Now, this actually is a pretty good book, and it's a really good read. I actually read through all of it. However, the authority behind this is questionable at best. Capcom did commission this, but they didn't write it themselves, so it's unsure if they approved it themselves or not. Now, in the book, it says, when the day Sigma dawned, the self-proclaimed steward of the Reploid race spared no one when he rained nuclear destruction upon Able City, his father included. Nevertheless, Dr. Kane endured and assisted X and Zero in their subsequent missions to counter Sigma's evil efforts. And that's the best we're getting here, so moving on. We can rapid fire the next few here because it's all pretty smooth sailing. So next up is X versus the X Hunters, which is in Mega Man X2. Then the Sigma virus attacks the Maverick User base, which is in Mega Man Extreme 1. Then there's the Doppeltown incident, which is in Mega Man X3. Then there's the Erasure incident, which is in Mega Man Extreme 2. Then there's the Rebel Force Rebellion, which is in Mega Man X4. Next is the Eurasia incident, which is Mega Man X5. Now, this would be where things would get muddy because there are 3 endings, but fortunately, Mega Man X6 tells you exactly what happened, so this is all good. The same can't be said for Mega Man X6 though. This is where we run into our first major contradiction. Now, while the majority of the plot in X6 is fine and doesn't really do anything wrong, Zero's ending in Mega Man X6 throws a lot of wrenches into the timeline. For those who don't know, Zero steals himself away for research in order to get rid of the Maverick virus. However, in Mega Man X7, he's back and he seems perfectly fine. Now, of course, this can mean a number of things. It could be that they're already done finishing his research and he's just back on assignment. But we already know this can't be true without a drastic time skip, because Zero is supposed to sleep for around 100 years. Now, the funny part is, Capcom does acknowledge that this is an issue within the Rotman Perfect Memories book, where it states that this discrepancy would be answered in Mega Man X7. Spoiler alert, it does not. This has led to the theory I stated before that there is a split timeline, and again, we'll get to that, but it's not here, for reasons that I've already stated. But there is another, actually much bigger theory out there that states that Zero's ending is the epilogue of the series. Now, this would involve a developer interview, and it has been stated pretty much multiple times for years, in fact, that someone has actually stated this. Now, I searched the internet for anything involving this interview. In fact, I even asked for outside help when I couldn't find anything, and the most they can give me is pages from Rotman Perfect Memories stating, yeah, it's acknowledged that it's an issue, but there's no definitive answer on what exactly is going on. So I think that this may have just been a fan theory that's gone wild, because there is literally no information regarding this. In fact, I would go as far as to say it's easier to just say that Zero's ending is not canon to the series at all. For now, we'll just have to sweep it under the rug and just move on. So an unknown amount of time happens, and then Mega Man X7 and Mega Man X8 happens. These both fit nicely into the timeline. Although there is one minor contradiction. The new generation Reploids are a thing and they are immune to the Sigma virus. Now, this isn't really a contradiction, it's more that it's a big phenomenon, considering the fact that the Mother Elf was necessary in order to get rid of the Sigma virus. So people within the fanbase are led to believe that the new generation Reploids cannot exist within the Mega Man Zero timeline, which is strictly not true, and I'll say this is more of a matter of overthinking things. Keep in mind that even though that there are new generation Reploids, there are also still old generation Reploids as well, so the Sigma virus will still be running rampant within those. And frankly speaking, we just don't know what happened to the new generation Reploids. Perhaps the Sigma virus evolved, perhaps the new generation Reploids were discontinued. There are a lot of possibilities and we can't say for sure. All we can really say is that without Capcom saying anything, there is no reason to assume that the new generation Reploids cannot exist. Next up are events leading up to Command Mission. A meteor hits Earth. With that meteor, Force Metal is discovered and refined, and revolutionizes Reploid engineering. Once they start harvesting, the Rebellion Army comes into play, and they banish all humans from Giga City and take over. X and Zero are sent over to Giga City to investigate, and that leads into Command Mission. Now, there is one particular detail that is very interesting, is that this is set in 22XX. This shouldn't really be a big deal, it's just that Mega Man X has moved into the new century, which makes sense, there's been a lot of events running to that point. However, during the concession phase of this game, it was led to believe that the Zero series was also in 22XX. Now, this has never been officially confirmed, but considering that Zero was supposed to be asleep for at least 100 years, it was a good estimated guess to go for. So Inafune had nothing to do with this game, and I assume that there was a very strong lack of communication. So the Command Mission team just took their guess and ran with it. And this is where the split timeline actually is. Command Mission is confirmed to be a possible future where Mega Man Zero does not happen. And while there have been hints that this is actually not the case, there has not been an official word of this just yet. The fact is, we don't actually know when the Zero series happens. We just know that it's 100 years after the X series. And that lack of a real date leaves a lot of room for a lot of games within the X series. So there certainly is room for Command Mission. But until Capcom comes out and says it themselves, this is what we have to go for. Now, while I say this, there actually is evidence to the contrary, although in a completely different manner. Under Zero's profile page within the Rockman X Dive website, it does state that Zero from the Mega Man Zero series is from another timeline, which somehow implies that the Mega Man Zero series is the one that diverges from the Mega Man X series. This is surprisingly not talked about much within the community, so I figured I should bring it up. That said, there could be translation issues, like always, so this is best taken with a grain of salt. Speaking of the Zero series, let's swap back to the other timeline. So for a long while, the Maverick Wars continue, until Zero agrees to steal himself away for more research. Within that research, the Mother Elf is created, and with the Mother Elf, X destroys the Sigma virus, once and for all. After this point, some dude named Dr. Wild wants to control all Reploids, but is denied, so he gets very angry and decides to steal Zero's body and create a Mega. He also modifies the Mother Elf into Dark Elf and begins the Elf Wars. During the Elf Wars, Zero gains a new body and helps X stop Omega. Once Omega is stopped, Zero decides to steal himself away again. Within the aftermath of the Elf Wars, Dr. Wild is exiled by the humans, and X creates Neo Arcadia, and becomes leader of both humans and Reploids. It has been stated though that although the war is over, Mavericks still come up from time to time and X has to take care of them. So here comes the utterly confusing part, which is that X steals himself away from the Dark Elf. There hasn't really been an indication of the Dark Elf becoming a problem again after the Elf Wars. So we're just basically led to believe that X found the Dark Elf and just decided to steal it away with his own body. And then after that, the 4 Guardians are created and CL creates Copy X. Then Copy X oppresses Reploids and the humans prosper ignorantly. Now this last 3 sections are a complete gobbledygook, because CL is a human and she created Copy X when she was a kid. This would have to mean Copy X would have to be created within the last 10 years of Neo Arcadia's reign before Zero awakens. But the information we got this from, which is the drama CDs, seems to imply that this has been going on for quite a while, possibly even more than 10 years. So this is a complete clusterfuck. Either way, the Resistance is created to fight Neo Arcadia, but they can't do anything, so CL decides to awaken Zero as a last-ditch effort to stop Copy X. And this is where we end the Mega Man X to Mega Man Zero timeline. I hope it made sense, I hope it answered a lot of questions, and most of all, I hope you all enjoyed the explanation. If you did so, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. There's more coming down the pipeline, so I'll hope to see you all there.